I'm a quarter Japanese, so I've always identified with my Japanese heritage and roots. My grandfather, this will lead up to the moment, right? So, like, my grandfather was first generation Japanese born in Hawaii. Japanese citizens were interned in concentration camps, but he actually fought for the Japanese military in Germany. Met my grandma, who was German, got married, came back to the US, had 8 kids, gave them all very white names, only spoke English in the homes, renounced a lot of their Japanese and German heritage because of the racism against those groups, right? And the aggressions against that from World War II. So I grew up with that narrative over my life. And I was trying to reclaim aspects of being Japanese. I never associated myself with privilege. In reality, like, I grew up in a very white suburb, looked super white. I had all these different things that were afforded to me. And I started to face a lot of this privilege through my journey in college and into industry, being part of multi-ethnic, multiracial churches that cared about these things. Well, be nice, Kai. They're fighting. Being called in. So the context for all that is one of the churches I was attending talked about, advocating for people of color. That was a language I had started to learn. And when we did our dry runs for a TED Talk, you had shared your whole story. And I thought that this is so impactful, not only for your people, but for white people to understand, like, this is what it feels like to step into a different context. And all of a sudden you're seen as a minority because you went from normative being Black in Trinidad and Tobago to all of a sudden, like, in America, there's a problem. So I said, like, I used the language colored people in some kind of feedback. And I thought I was being helpful. Like, that I knew what I was saying. It was like, there's so many connotations with that are just completely off the mark. And you had an aside with someone else from J&J who's a man of color and discussed that a bit. And then during dinner, we were sharing space and I had no idea what I'd missaid. You had processed that and carried the weight of that term and how I had spoken for probably multiple hours. And then at the table, you broached that topic. You brought truth into those spaces and you asked permission as you shared, which you didn't even have to do with me, but you kind of validated that I seemed like someone who wanted to grow in these spaces. And you creating space for me when I'd not given space to you in that area was so deeply impactful in my career. We continued together to continue to advocate for equity at J&J and different initiatives over the years. But that moment was so transformative for me. And I still trip on my words and think before I speak, right? As you're trying to grow and step out. So I know that there have been moments where you've done that for people and you haven't gotten the response and the growth because people aren't always open to it. And it's hard to show up and wear that responsibility day in and day out. So thank you.